daughter. He saw her as an enemy. On this specific night, the rain was pouring like the sky was crying. Inside the mansion, it was suffocating. Uncle Richard had just cornered her again, waving papers in her face, screaming at her to sign away the last of her father's company. He told her she was nothing. He told her she was weak. Clara didn't say a word. The tears were burning her throat. She just grabbed her car keys, ran out into the freezing storm, and got into her car. She didn't know where she was going. She just wanted to drive until the noise in her head stopped. The storm was blinding. Clara couldn't even see the road ahead. She drove away from the bright lights of the rich neighborhoods, deeper and deeper into the dark, forgotten side of the city, the slums, a place where the streets were broken and the concrete was grey. Suddenly, a beautiful sports car hit a massive, deep puddle of thick mud right under an old, dark concrete bridge. The dashboard went black. The headlights died. Just heavy smoke rising into the cold air. Clara tried to turn the key again and again, but the car was dead. She looked at her phone. No network, no bars, just her own terrified face reflecting in the dark screen. She had to get out. The moment her expensive shoes touched the ground, she sank directly into the freezing mud. The rain hit her bare skin like needles. Her beautiful green silk dress was ruined, soaked, and heavy. She stood there in the dark, shivering violently, crying out loud. She was completely stranded. And then she felt a gaze. Someone was watching her. Clara turned around, her heart jumping into her throat. Deep in the shadows of the concrete bridge, sitting on an old plastic crate, was a man. Everyone in this ghetto knew him. They called him Crazy Leo. They said he was a madman who lost his mind years ago. He looked terrifying. His clothes were ripped and dirty. A heavy, mud-stained blanket was thrown over his shoulders. His hair was wild, and a thick beard covered his entire face. Clara screamed softly and backed up against her car. She thought he was going to attack her. She thought this was the end, but the madman didn't move. He didn't even yell. Instead, he lifted a small, cheap plastic flashlight. He clicked it on, but he didn't point it at her face to scare her. He pointed the light down, right at a sharp piece of broken glass she was about to step on. He was protecting her. Slowly, the man stood up. He was incredibly tall and broad, standing like a giant in the dark. He walked out into the heavy rain toward her. Clara squeezed her eyes shut, trembling, waiting for the worst. But instead of pain, she felt warmth. When she opened her eyes, Leo had taken off his heavy grey blanket. With huge, steady hands, he gently placed it over her shivering shoulders. Clara looked up into his face. The light from the flashlight hit his eyes, and that was the moment Clara's breath stopped. Those were not the empty, crazy eyes of a lunatic. They were deep, they were sharp, they were filled with an intelligent, agonizing pain that was so heavy it felt alive. He didn't say a single word. He just gently pointed to a dry corner under the bridge where the rain couldn't reach. In that moment, wrapped in a stranger's dirty blanket in the middle of the slums, Clara felt safer than she had ever felt in a billion-dollar mansion. But you cannot hide a beautiful thing in the dark for long. Uncle Richard had noticed Clara's missing hours. He grew suspicious, thinking she was planning a rebellion against him, so he paid men to track her down. One afternoon, while Clara was reading a story out loud to Leo, the piece was ripped apart. 3 massive men in dark leather jackets stepped under the bridge. They had cruel smiles and weapons in their hands. Well, look at the little princess playing in the mud with the garbage. Boss said, "You're getting too bold, Clara. Time to go home and time to delete this trash." One of the thugs lunged forward and grabbed Clara's arm violently, twisting it behind her back. Clara screamed, dropping the book into the mud. In that exact microsecond, the slouching madman disappeared. Leo stood up. He didn't look like a beggar anymore. He looked like a demon. His movement was so fast, it didn't even look human. Before the thug could even draw a breath, Leo's hand clamped onto the man's wrist like an iron vice. With one brutal twist, the man's arm snapped. The thug screamed, collapsing to his knees. The other two thugs yelled, swinging their heavy iron pipes right at Leo's head. Leo didn't even blink. He didn't run. He moved with the cold, terrifying precision of a professional killer. He ducked under the first wing, caught the second thug by his throat with one hand, and lifted him completely off the ground, slamming him into the concrete wall. The last thug pulled out a switchblade, but Leo executed a lightning-fast, military-grade kick straight to the man's ribs, sending him flying into the rushing river. In 60 seconds, the ground was covered in blood and unconscious men. Clara was pressed against the concrete pillar, her hands over her mouth, her body shaking so hard she could barely stand. She stared at the man she thought was a harmless mute. Leo stood perfectly straight. His posture was kingly. The dirt on his face couldn't hide the raw power radiating from him. He wiped a smear of blood from his jaw, turned his head, and looked straight into Clara's eyes. When he spoke, his voice wasn't broken. It was deep, smooth, and incredibly royal. God didn't send them to scare you, Clara. He sent them to kill us because he finally realized that the man he tried to murder 2 years ago is still breathing. Who are you?
Who are you?
My name is Leonard Vance.
I became a madman so I could stay alive in the dark. But today the dark is over.
Under that dark bridge, the world had completely changed. The silent beggar was gone. Standing in front of Clara was a ghost from a past she never knew. Clara's hands were still shaking as she put her car in drive. She didn't take Leo back to her mansion. Uncle Richard's spies were everywhere. Instead, she drove deep into the outskirts of the city to a small, hidden apartment her late father had bought for her years ago, a place nobody else knew about. When they stepped inside, the silence between them was heavy. Leo stood in the middle of the clean, modern living room. In his tattered, mud-stained clothes, he looked completely out of place. He looked down at the pristine wooden floor, then at his own bare, scarred feet. For 2 whole years, he had been treated like trash. He had forgotten what a real home felt like. Clara looked at him, her heart aching with the deep, human pain. She didn't see a fearsome soldier right now. She just saw a broken soul who had been suffering in the dark for far too long. Gently, without saying a word, she walked over to him. She took the dirty, wet blanket from his shoulders. Her small, soft hand brushed against his arm. Leo flinched slightly. He wasn't used to a gentle touch, but when he looked into her eyes, he saw no fear, only warmth. You are safe here, Leonard. No one can hurt you anymore. Clara sat him down. She didn't care about the mud on his tattered clothes. She brought a bowl of warm water and a clean towel. Very gently, her hands trembling, she began to wipe the dirt from his face. She wiped away the dried blood from the fight, and as the layers of mud faded, the real Leonard appeared. He was beautiful. His jaw was sharp, his skin pale from years in the dark, but his presence was undeniable. When Clara's fingers brushed against the deep scar on his cheek, Leonard flinched. Not from pain, but because he had forgotten what tenderness felt like. A single tear rolled down his face, cutting a clean line through the remaining dust. He looked into Clara's eyes, and for the first time, He smiled. It was a tiny, broken smile, but it was real. They didn't talk about empires. They didn't talk about money. In that small room, they just held each other until the morning sun broke through the curtains. They were two outcasts who had finally found home. But peace is a luxury when you are fighting monsters. The next day, the real work began. Leonard was no longer a mute. When he spoke, his voice was deep, calm, and highly intelligent. He told Clara everything. When Uncle Richard tried to kill him 2 years ago, Leonard didn't just run. He stayed in the slums right next to the main shipping docks because that was where Richard did all his illegal business. While everyone thought Leonard was just a crazy beggar talking to walls, he was actually watching. He memorized every truck license plate. He saw every illegal delivery. He knew every corrupt politician who visited the docks at night. He had all the evidence inside a small flash drive buried under the bridge. But he needed one thing to make it work. He needed access to the main company's server inside the Sterling mansion. Clara looked at him, her heart beating fast. To get that access, she would have to go back into the lion's den. She would have to face her Uncle Richard alone, pretending that nothing had changed. Leonard took her hands in his. His grip was warm and tight. He told her, if anything goes wrong, I will come for you. I don't care if I have to burn the whole city down. Returning to the mansion felt like walking into a trap. That night, while the house was dead silent, Clara crept into Uncle Richard's private study. The air felt heavy with evil. Her hand shook as she opened his laptop and plugged in the device Leonard had given her. Percentage loading, 10%, 30%, 50%. Every second felt like a year. Outside, the wind howled. Suddenly, she heard it. Footsteps, heavy, expensive shoes, walking down the marble hallway, coming straight towards the office. Clara's heart stopped. She pulled the flash drive out. Just as the door swung open, the lights clicked on. There stood Uncle Richard. His eyes were cold, narrow, and full of suspicion. He looked at Clara, standing by his desk in the dark. Uncle Richard, what are you doing in my office, Clara? It's 3 a.m. Clara swallowed a lump of fear in her throat. She forced a fake smile, pretending to be broken and sad. Clara, I couldn't sleep, Uncle. I was just looking at the old photo of my father on your desk. I miss him. Richard stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. The silence was so thick you could hear her heartbeat. Finally, he sneered, telling her to get out and go back to bed. Clara walked past him, her body trembling. She had the data, but as she left, she saw the look in her uncle's eyes. He didn't fully believe her. Time was running out. They had everything they needed. The trap was set. The next morning was the annual Sterling corporate gala, the day Richard planned to officially declare Clara's father dead and take full control of the entire billion-dollar empire. He thought he had won the war. Back in the small apartment, Clara brought out a large black box. Inside was a custom, bespoke black suit, a crisp white shirt, and polished shoes. Leonard looked at the suit. For 2 years, his skin had only known tattered rags and cold mud. He put it on. When he stepped out, Clara's breath caught in her throat. The transformation was complete. The slouching, broken, crazy Leo from under the bridge was completely gone. Standing before her was a man of absolute power, elegance, and dangerous beauty. He looked like a king who had just risen from his grave. Leonard walked up to Clara, looked down at her, and took her small hand in his. Leo, are you ready to take back what belongs to your father? Clara, with you, I am ready for anything. They had started in the freezing rain. surrounded by dirt and poverty. But tonight, they were going into the brightest lights of the high society gala. The madman was gone. The king was coming back for his throne, and this time he had his queen by his side. The grand gala was beautiful. The room was filled with gold, expensive wine, and flashing cameras. Uncle Richard stood on the stage, smiling. He had the microphone in his hand. He was seconds away from signing the papers to take full control of everything. He thought he had won. He thought Clara was locked away and the madman was forgotten in the dirt. But a dead man doesn't stay in the grave when his queen needs him. The massive double doors of the ballroom burst open. Walking down the red carpet was Clara. She looked breathtaking, like a true princess. But it wasn't Clara that made the entire room freeze. It was the man beside her. He walked with the heavy, powerful steps of a king. His suit was flawless. His face was clean and dangerously handsome. There was no trace of crazy Leo left, no rags, no mud, only raw, terrifying power. On the stage, the glass of champagne dropped from Uncle Richard's hand, smashing into 1,000 pieces. Richard's face turned completely white. His knees began to shake. He looked like he was staring at a ghost that had just crawled out of hell. He tried to speak, but his throat was completely dry. Leonard didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He just looked across the crowded room, his sharp eyes locking onto Richard like a sniper. He smiled a small, cold smile and began walking straight toward the stage. Every step Leonard took made the room grow colder. The rich tycoons and the journalists parted ways, clearing a path for him. He stepped onto the stage and took the microphone directly from Richard's shaking hand. Uncle Richard, stammering, whispering, You are dead. I saw your car burn. You are supposed to be a lunatic in the streets. You thought madness was a curse, Richard, but it was my sanctuary. While you thought I was eating dirt under a bridge, I was watching you. I recorded every illegal shipment. I saved every document you tried to burn. And tonight, your empire of cards falls. The grand doors opened again, but this time it wasn't royalty. It was the federal police. Richard screamed, begging for mercy, trying to run, but the officer slammed him to the ground, right in front of the flashing cameras. The man who thought he owned the city was led away in heavy chains. The crowd began to cheer, but Leonard didn't care about the applause. He turned around, walked away from the stage, and went straight to Clara. He reached out and took her hand. It was warm. It was safe. Later that night, they stood together on the highest balcony of the Sterling Tower, looking out at the city lights. The storm had finally passed. The air was clean. I spent 2 years in the dark, Clara. I thought I would never see the light again. Clara, smiling, tears in her eyes. The light was always there, Leo. We just had to find it under the bridge. They started in the mud, surrounded by cold rain and poverty. But love didn't care about the dirt. They had survived the dark, and now the city belonged to the king and his queen.
Tell me what you learned from this story, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories like this. Thank you.